Hello, everyone. How are you doing this evening? I want to thank you all so much for coming. This is Left Bank Books welcomes young adult genderqueer author Stephen Salvatore, who will discuss their debut book, Can't Take That Away. Salvatore will be in conversation with Sarah Holt, the former Left Bank Books children's specialist and beloved St. Louisan. We just love and miss Sarah. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Stephen Salvatore, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world even. We are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com, and I will provide a link in the comments directly for the book. Purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of other events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, so please type your questions as a comment. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. We have so many incredible events lined up for the year and are adding events daily. About tonight's book, Can't Take That Away. Phil Stamper, the best-selling author of The Gravity of Us, says, a charming, inspired story about being true to who you are. An empowering and emotional debut about a genderqueer teen who finds the courage to stand up and speak out for equality when they are discriminated against by their high school administration. Carrie Parker dreams of being a diva and bringing the house down with song. They can hit every note of all the top pop and Broadway hits, but despite their talent, emotional scars from an incident with a homophobic classmate and their grandmother's spiraling dementia make it harder and harder for Carrie to find their voice. Then Carrie meets Chris, a singer-guitarist who makes Carrie feel seen for the first time in their life. With the rush of a promising new romantic relationship, Carrie finds the confidence to audition for the role of Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, in the school musical, setting off a chain reaction of prejudice by Carrie's tormentor and others in the school. It's up to Carrie, Chris, and their friends to defend their rights, and they refuse to be silenced. Told in alternating chapters with identifying pronouns, debut author Stephen Salvatore, Can't Take That Away, conducts a powerful, uplifting anthem, a swoony romance, and an affirmation of self-identity that will ignite the activism in all of us. The book list starred review says, this charming, joyful story about self-love, fighting for what's right, and the love to be found in chosen family will make you want to put on a pair of red heels and blast Mariah Carey. And the School Library Journal says, a fresh voice plus a genderqueer teen plus one wicked musical plus fighting against the establishment plus first love equals a page-turning YA debut. Recommended for all YA collections. About tonight's author. Stephen Salvatore is a gay genderqueer author, educator, Mariah Carey lamb, and Star Wars fanatic who spends most days daydreaming and making up stories. They have an MFA in creative writing from the New School. They were formerly a full-time assistant professor of composition and director of the Writing Center at the College of New Rochelle. After the college permanently closed in 2019, they took a step back from teaching full-time to focus on their writing, though they do still teach at a few colleges while running a writing workshop at The Loft, an LGBT resource center in White Plains, New York. Stephen currently lives in Peekskill, New York, with their amazingly patient husband, whose name is also Steve. Tonight, Stephen will be in conversation with the incredible Sarah Lynn Holt, former children's event children's specialist for Left Bank Books and currently the artistic director of RS Theatrics. If everyone at home would please help me in giving them a very loud and hearty warm welcome so that they can hear you all over the place. Hello!
Hey!
Hi!
Hi, thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I know I can't see everyone out there, but I'm so happy to be back here, and I hope to hear so much in the comments and questions later tonight. But first, congratulations, Stephen. It's a book.
Thank you so much.
So this is your debut novel, and that's so exciting.
Yes, it's a wild experience. I'm still figuring out if it's actually real or not. We'll probably land on real soon, but yeah.
It's pretty real to me.
I mean, like, I'm surrounded by actual, like, hard copies of my book, so I guess in some sense it's real. I don't know.
So can you tell, we heard the description that Shane gave us. Can you tell us what your elevator pitch for the book is? Is there anything different you want to put out there about what this experience is for readers?
I am the worst at elevator pitches. Like, it was horrible during the querying process when, I had to like develop a synopsis to go on submission. I was freaking out. Anytime I had to sum up my work, it never works out well. But basically, I would say that this is a story about standing up for yourself and finding your voice and realizing that there is so much love around you if you are just willing and ready to accept that love. And, that's the journey that Carrie goes through, and can't take that away.
I'd like to, before we get too much into talking about the book, briefly touch on Carrie's gender identity and how the pronouns we're using to discuss this might be a little different than what Carrie would have us use in day-to-day life, because we're talking about a fictional character in the total. But can you tell us how Carrie experiences gender identity and how that identity interacts with the world a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say Carrie, like myself, would default to they, them pronouns. The way that Carrie feels about gender is sort of the way that I feel about gender. Like, I poured all of myself and the things that I was experiencing and my feelings and the relationship that I have with gender into the story, into Carrie. And I sort of describe it as energy shifts, where 1 minute, like, I may be feeling a more male, masculine energy. And then, I don't even want to say minute by minute, because there's no real, like, hard and fast way to describe it. I'm just sort of, I don't know, giving you my elevator pitch for gender. But and then like all of a sudden it'll just shift. There are times that I feel more masculine. There are times that I feel more on the feminine side. And there are times that I feel sort of like floating somewhere in between, in this like nebulous place that's not really all that concrete and definable. I never really felt like I was part of a binary, so to speak. Even though, like, I guess I identify as non-binary, I don't often use non-binary. The term genderqueer just sort of fits me because it's sort of this like nebulous term to describe gender, and that's how I feel. That's how Carrie expresses themselves. So yeah.
So for tonight's conversation, we'll be using they, them for Carrie, but as people will find out as they read the book, that's not always the way Carrie presents themselves on a day-to-day basis. I just wanted to say that we're not policing that for Carrie, but we do need to have some vocabulary for when Carrie is not present.
Cool. Absolutely. Yes.
So, what was your journey to telling this particular story?
So my journey, I was in therapy for a couple of years for a lot of different things. Everybody should be in therapy. Like, I'm a big advocate. I'm married to a therapist. I think everybody needs some therapy. But I was trying to sort of process, among other things, like my relationship with gender. And I tell this story a lot, but I'm a college professor, and at that time I was teaching a creative writing course. It was spring 2018, and I gave my students a prompt. And I don't normally participate in the creative writing prompts. I just sort of let them do their thing. Maybe I'll do a little bit of like scratch writing, but that day, for whatever reason, I was like, you know what, I feel inspired to do a little bit of exploring. And all of a sudden, Carrie just emerged on the page, and they didn't have a name yet. They didn't have a story. All that emerged was this red-haired teen in their therapist's office. And they were upset because a bully, had just destroyed their lucky pair of ruby red slippers. The original scene was this bully had torched the shoes. And so Carrie was like sitting there holding this like smoldering pair of like ashy shoes. And it was kind of like an emotionally traumatic scene. That's not the scene that exists in the book now as it is. But a version of that scene still is in the book. And I knew that there was something there that I had to write about. But I didn't work on the story after that for about a good month, but Carrie never left my mind. And I think it was just because I was sort of processing a lot of stuff about myself and just trying to figure that out, that when I was finally able to, like, I guess, grapple with the fact that this person was not going to leave me because I can't leave myself, I was able to sit down, and I just sort of shut myself away for like a month and a half and banged out a first draft, or a zero draft.
That's interesting, because talking to different authors, like, some stories start with a world, some start with an event, and some start with a character. And reading this book, I'm not at all surprised that this started with a character. He is so fully, or they're so fully realized and just present in every moment of the book, not just because they are the narrative character, but just a very compelling character to read about.
That's nice to know.
So, do you have the author experience of having a bunch of manuscripts that you will never let see the light of day that preceded this one?
Oh my God, so many. I started writing in 2006. I wrote my first, I started writing when I was like 6 or 8 years old. I forget. It was 1994, and I was writing Lion King fiction. I do remember that. But I didn't really start like throwing myself into my writing until about 2006. I wrote my first book when I was a sophomore in college. Horrible. I mean, I thought that it was like the next Catcher in the Rye, Grapes of Wrath, Great Gatsby, like the next great American novel. That's what it was. It truly was not. It was terrible. That's in my folder somewhere on my computer. I think I wrote and queried about 6 or 7 manuscripts before I got my first agent. And the manuscript that I got my first agent with didn't actually sell. It didn't go anywhere. Me and that agent parted ways. And then I got my now agent with Can't Take That Away. And that's what sold. That's what stuck.
So, one of the major movements in literature in general right now, and particularly in literature for children and teens, is the need for diverse books. Which there's the We Need Diverse Books organization, but then there's just a greater awareness that publishing has been very white, very very heterosexual, very cisgender, and depending on what genre you're in, not as much in children's, but in other places, very male.
Yes.
So among the diverse books movement, we've seen a subset called Own Voices, which refers to stories where the author shares the identity of the protagonist and is therefore able to lend a greater authenticity. And it also leads to more diversity in authors, because we don't just want to see the same establishment authors diversifying their characters. We want to see more people being brought in, real people being brought into publishing. So this book is being mentioned as an Own Voices debut.
Yeah.
Was that intentional on your part, or is that something that the book was sort of adopted into that fold later?
I mean, when I was writing the book, I wrote it to write it because it was a story that I needed to tell for myself. You know, so much of who Carrie is me. I mean, there are clear differences. I'm not a singer. I don't have red hair, although I did have red hair for a time, thanks to my fabulous hairstylist. But I'm a natural blonde. Unlike, Carrie uses she, her pronouns in addition to they, them, and he, him. I only use they, them, and he, him. So there are some clear differences between the two of us, but like the experiences, the family, the friends, a lot of what Carrie processes and goes through is me and my experiences and my thoughts, my feelings. So while I was writing it, I was just writing a book that I needed to write for myself. The book that, 18-year-old, 17-year-old, 16-year-old me really needed to have. I mean, the book that like 34-year-old me really needed to have, let's be honest, because, there really aren't very many books with genderqueer main characters at all. And quite frankly, I think mine might currently be the only YA with a genderqueer main character right now. There are quite a few books with non-binary main characters, but there are a couple books with genderqueer side characters or non-binary side characters, but not nearly any or many with genderqueer. But as I was, trying to sell it, like I knew that I was going to be using the Own Voices, hashtag label in the querying process, just because it is an Own Voices experience. So that's really why the whole movement was created, right? To like allow people to tell their own stories and to shine this light and say, like, this is a lived experience. This is something that I know firsthand. This isn't something that, I had to do research on because this is outside of my identity. And even then, like, I still did my due diligence and, had sensitivity readers and such. Even though that's a weird experience because it's like, you're going to read based on my personal experience. But it's part of the process, and it's a necessary part of the process.
Yeah. You don't want to portray something as universal when it turns out it's your experience.
Exactly.
So similar question. Obviously, since this started with Carrie, and Carrie was always a teenager.
Yes.
It's sort of a natural place for this story to land in YA. Was that surprising to you to find yourself a YA author? Or is that somewhere where you had seen yourself potentially ending up?
So when I was an undergrad, I was a writing major in undergrad, and I took a writing children's lit course my junior year. And that was where I sort of was open up I was opened up to young adult as a separate genre. Like I always knew that like children's books were children's books and adult books, I always just referred to them as, it's always weird to me to like refer to like adult books as adult books because they're just books. Like, I don't know, Can't Take That Away to me is just a book. I mean, obviously it's for a target audience, but that's a conversation for another time. But I was opened up to that world, and it was something that I was intentional about from that point on. Everything that I had written after that was for a YA audience because that's primarily what I was reading. Because I was just so drawn into the writing and the worlds and the richness of that YA had to offer. I found it to be much more dynamic and layered, and I don't know, the characters felt always more real to me and accessible to me than your quote unquote adult novels.
I'll give my little pitch for YA that I'll tell to whoever will listen. That what's fascinating to me is it's not a genre the way we think of other genres.
Yes.
It is a different kind of subset that can include any and all genres within it. And being in YA is so freeing for authors because you can mix and meld genres and the things that people would look at and be confused of, I don't know, do I put this in science fiction or in literary fiction? Or you can avoid that in YA and still be marketable.
Yeah.
I think it was my favorite take on YA came from Nick Hornby, the author of High Fidelity and About a Boy. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here. People should look up the real quote. It's in a Believer article he wrote. Once I realized that not reading young adult fiction was just as ridiculous as not reading mysteries because I am not a police officer or a criminal, I discovered a room in the back of the bookstore with masterpieces I never knew existed.
Yes, yes.
And that's, so anyone who's thinking, oh, well, I'll give this to my teen nephew or whatever, but that's not a book for me. Try it.
What's actually really great is that I've been, I've heard from some people, of varying ages, like outside of your like target YA audience that, were just like, this is a book that I learned a lot from. I personally love that. I know that, books about certain people, diverse, marginalized authors are, there's this whole conversation about like, should we call a book important? Does that lessen the value of the lived experience or the identity of the author and the character? But, I do think that for a lot of people, LGBTQ books are those moments, those teachable moments for a lot of people who might still not really be accepting. So, I'm happy to hear from especially older readers who are like, this is an important book. I'm like, okay, that's great. Let's do something with that.
So speaking of always being in the middle of the journey, so many explorations of gender identity, sexuality, etc., particularly in YA, are about the protagonist coming out. Yes. To themselves, to other people, maybe both in the same book. But when we meet Carrie, Carrie has already done the initial work of exploring where they fall on a gender spectrum and has already initially come out to their community. Of course, it is a perpetual journey for anyone who is not cisgender. Yeah. Have to continually come out, but the wider existing community of theirs have been introduced to the idea that Carrie is genderqueer. Where why did you decide to pick up the story there and skip over? We look back at the coming out process, but it's not part of this narrative.
Yeah, I think because the coming out process is such an important process for anybody who is LGBTQ plus. It doesn't even have to be something that is traumatic. You can be, Simon Spear from Simon versus the Homo sapien Agenda, right? Where you have these great liberal parents who are super accepting and super supportive. And, on paper, it's like you have nothing to fear. But there is still that fear. So like, even if you are somebody who has really supportive family members, there is still, it's a big thing to come out. And for Carrie, for that to be part of Carrie's story, it would have overtaken the narrative. You look at a lot of books where coming out is part of the main plot, and it's part of the main plot because you really can't write around it. You can't write, you just have to write through it. You have to like really have that be a central focus, and not some sort of like, C or D plot. Like it has to be something that's very prominent. And I didn't want that for Carrie. That wasn't Carrie's story. Carrie did the work. They came out before, probably like 6-ish months before the start of the story. They came out to their friends. A year before the start of the story, they came out to their mother and their therapist and themselves, really. So they had done that work. And I think the reality of being LGBTQ is not for everybody, but for certain people, for gender nonconforming people, non-binary people, trans people, like you step out of your house and you come out every day. There's no, it's not like the cisgender experience where, you can sort of hide yourself. You can't. You walk out and, people make assumptions about you, even if you say nothing. So, there is a little bit of that throughout the book, but it's not the central focus.
And also, as a reader, I really enjoyed the fact that it really emphasizes that you're not done.
Yeah.
Coming out isn't the end of the journey. Now we did everything and we just live our life.
Exactly. It's not that simple. I wish it were. I wish that, for every queer person, it was like sunshine and rainbows and gumdrops. I think that's the ideal world. That's the utopia. But as far as I know, there's no such thing as a utopia. So.
But even in that utopia, those people would still be learning about themselves, ideally.
Always.
Still developing, still going on the journey. Even if the journey is free from the bad parts, there's still a journey to go on. And we see the good journey as well in this book. The fact that if you don't rest on your laurels, you'll keep advancing in your personal fulfillment. And speaking of some of those good parts, so artistic expression is really important in this book, not just for Carrie, who is a musician and performer, but we see Monroe has fashion design, Chris has music, Isaiah has music. Like the characters are all over the place. Phoebe's acting. They all have these really deeply felt ways of expressing themselves. So what do you think this artistic expression connection means for people, particularly teens, that made it such a central part of this book?
I would say, for me, it's just a part of who these characters are. And I think that, the teens that I know are just these like incredibly passionate individuals. And that is something that I always want to translate to the page, right? That, and sometimes to contrast that, there are not maybe does, have that passion, and what that journey looks like. But, so much of what inspired especially like the activist part of this book was, seeing like the Parkland students rise up, and someone like Greta Thunberg, right? Like these young kids who are just channeling their passion somewhere. And, to tie that back to something, that you said a little bit earlier, that, some stories start with character, some stories start with world. Like for me, it's always been character. And I always have to like fully flesh out all of the supporting people before I really like dive into the world. And so like for me, Monroe and Joey and Phoebe are based on real people. And Monroe was always a fashion designer. Joey was always this like basketball star who was destined for the WNBA. Phoebe was, I didn't know exactly where Phoebe was going to fall in the story. I just knew that she was a pivotal character. And once the Wicked element came into play, I was like, oh, Phoebe's a Broadway actress. Like that's exactly who she is. She's going to come out and she's going to try out for Glinda the Good Witch. And at first, I'm going to position it as maybe there's a little bit of rivalry between Carrie and Phoebe, but that is quickly squashed. So I wanted to like do that little bit of a pivot really quickly, that fake out. Sorry, I just spoiled something. I said before the conversation that I don't spoil anything, and I just spoiled something. But yeah, I think it's always important for characters, for me, to have some sort of drive, to have some sort of end goal, so that they feel like fully realized people, because to me they're flesh and blood.
So there's so much that you have in common with Carrie, but you said that you are not a singer. Ooh. How did Carrie's passion become music and musical performance?
So a lot of that actually can be connected to my grandmother, who the grandmother character in the book is like word for word a replica of my grandmother. She passed away in 2016. We were really close. My grandma growing up was like my best friend. She always called me her number one because I was the first grandchild. And I was the first grandchild for like many, many years until my cousin came along and my cousins came along. So it was like me and her for a really long time. And my grandmother was a singer. And there's this story in the book. It's a little bit of a backstory where, Carrie talks about how their grandmother, used to sing at these smoky clubs, and it was her dream to have a record deal. And, one day a record executive approached her and wanted to sign her. And before that came to fruition, the record executive passed away in a car accident. And that's exactly what happened to my grandmother. She never got to make her album. She had this like rich, gorgeous voice, like a Rosemary Clooney. But she still sang. She sang for my mom and my aunts. She sang for me. She sang for my cousin. She sang anywhere and everywhere she could. She just never got to do it at a professional level. And so I wanted to pay homage to my grandmother. And I wished that I had a voice. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to give Carrie something that I didn't have and live a little vicariously through them.
So I'm going to skip ahead in my questions then, because one of the most powerful parts of this book to me was Carrie's relationship with their grandmother, Grams, who is at the point when we meet them suffering from dementia.
Yes.
And it was very powerful for me because I too had a singer grandmother who suffered from dementia and passed away in 2016. So
wow, parallels. Oh my God, we're twins. We're soul sisters.
So I was curious. I think I have my answer now, because it seems like a lot of people would have maybe not included that because, Carrie's got enough going on. We don't need to add a grandmother with dementia. But it sounds like the inclusion of that in the narrative was very personally important to you.
It was very important to me. And, beyond, I try to stay off of certain websites like your Goodreads, because no author really needs to go on Goodreads. But, there've been, a couple reviews here and there that are like, the author throws so much at Carrie. There's a lot, like it's this and this, and then a grandmother who has Alzheimer's, and it's like enough already. And the way that I look at it is like, I'm sorry, we don't get to choose like what happens to us in our lives. Like, unfortunately, I think this is a reality for everybody, unless like, your Cher's children, like you're going to lose a grandmother at some point. Like, it's part of living. It's just part of, that process. So, that was something that it was always a non-negotiable for me. I wanted to include the grandmother because I wanted to showcase the relationship. I wanted to use the grandmother as a way to really show that intergenerational support for Carrie, which you rarely see, especially like from, older generations with LGBTQ support. It's dicey at best. So I wanted to show that there was like this beautiful relationship between the two of them, and that it was really important for Carrie. And ultimately, everything that they go through with their grandmother makes them stronger. It makes them grow as a person. And, they're going to be a better person, a better singer, a better activist because of their grandmother. So there is purpose. It's not, I don't just throw the kitchen sink at my characters.
So getting at that idea of this support system that Carrie has, we see a lot of queer narratives that look at found family, the concept of you have your biological family, but then you also have the people that you voluntarily include in your life that offer a support system that is similar to what we think families should do. We don't always see it, but so how intentional were you? This is sort of a double question about portraying Carrie finding those people, some of whom we are pre-existing relationships and others come in during the story. And what made you've touched on it a little bit, give Carrie a supportive family in their mother and grandmother, rather than having that stereotypical, my family doesn't support me, therefore I need to find a family instead?
Yes. Well, I really wanted Carrie to, be able to find solace in the relationship with their mother. Growing up, my relationship with my mom we were super close. I wasn't out. I didn't come out until later in life, but, my teenage years, like me and my mom were like this, me and my grandmother were really close. Me and my aunts were really close. Like I had a really, really close relationship with everybody in my family. Me and my sister are really close. So for me, the familial element and having that familial support was important. I didn't want to throw that at Carrie. That was the one thing that I wanted Carrie to have a safe haven at home, because, and it's not even like the rest of the world is against Carrie or hates Carrie. It's two people out of an entire community that are not on board with Carrie. Everybody else is on board with Carrie, but it's like, it's like the flip side of that Lady Gaga quote. Like you can have 100 people in a room, 99 of them don't believe in you. All it takes is one. Like For a queer person, you can have 100 people in the room, 99 of them support you and only one doesn't, and that one person is going to make your life a living hell. So like for me, the actual familial element was important. As far as the found family is concerned, you know, Sunnyside, which is a fictional town in New York State where Can't Take That Away takes place, it's a small town. And, you know, sometimes it's not easy to find queer people in a small town. But the thing about found family and, you know, queer people finding each other is that they do find each other somehow, right? It might be through roundabout ways, but like, this is not a spoiler because I don't believe that, you know, sexual identity is a spoiler, but Phoebe is pansexual. And Carrie finds this out when they see the pansexual flag that Phoebe has pinned to her backpack, or it's like inside of her. I'm forgetting my own book now, but it's either on her backpack or inside of her backpack or somewhere around her backpack. And so like, it's by chance that they see that in Phoebe. And so it's like, they immediately sense this bond with them and they form this like immediate friendship, and it's really fast. And I wanted to showcase that. I think it's really important. And, you know, likewise, Monroe and Joey are cis straight girls, and they're really important to Carrie. They are Carrie's two best friends, and they are the most supportive people in Carrie's life, even though there's some tension between Carrie and Joey when the book starts. But that was really important to just show like how people find each other and create their own little family bubble.
Okay, I know we're getting up on when we need to take questions, but there are two really important things that we have not touched on yet, and I want to make sure we talk about them.
Yeah.
First, I'm not going to give a lot of context because it's later in the book, but there's a lot of very intentional, organized activism that goes on with Carrie and their friends and their the supportive adults. First of all, were you a high school activist?
I was not. I sadly was somebody in high school who, if you told them, like, if you told me in high school, like, are you an activist? I would be like, I don't even know what the word activist means, but yeah, sure, peace. I was not like that at all. I think I'm gonna call out people in my generation. Like, we are a supportive bunch. But when I was in high school, like nobody was organizing anything. Like we were just like, oh, whatever. It wasn't until like I got to college that like people around me started like really organizing those. That was during the George W. Bush years. So, you know, and I went to a super liberal college. So we were all about, rallying and organizing and like educating people. So I didn't really activate that until I was a little bit older.
And what do you hope that current high schoolers will take from those sections of the book?
That your voice can be heard and should be heard. And even if people are not going to try to listen to you, because people, especially school administration officials, like they will try not to listen to you, and they will tell you that they're listening to you, and they will shake their head and they will go and do the politician like, oh, absolutely, thank you for your contribution. But they really will not. And I can say that having worked in the education system for quite some time, that they toe the party line. And that's sort of something that's explored in the book with the principal character, who's this like middle of the road, gives the politician answers, doesn't want to sway one way or the other, is trying to like, straddle both sides of the line. And it's frustrating. But that's real life. But you can make a difference. And at the end of the book, there is, extra material. There's an essay written from Phoebe's point of view, is an English essay about how, she and Carrie and all their friends organized the protest. And that, for me, serves as a step-by-step tool. So teens, if you're reading and, you want to organize, read Phoebe's essay at the back of the book. It'll give you step-by-step instructions.
And finally, for the last question, I'd like to talk about the central conflict of the book that I've somehow avoided till now. So Carrie is cast as, spoiler, cast as Elphaba, and then it's on the back of the book.
It's on the cover.
So this causes some controversy. There are people who think Carrie should not play this character because Carrie is not a cisgender female student.
Yes.
So that this comes from somewhere real. That people who are outside of the gender binary in the arts, particularly in acting, get a lot of resistance.
Yes.
So what can adults who are working with teens in the arts do if they would like to be supportive? Do you have resources or suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing that you can do is to stop performing, allyship and actually be an ally. And what that means is educating yourself. Read books. Read Can't Take That Away. Read read Felix Ever After. Read these stories that are truly important, and then sync up with your local PFLAG, sync up with your local LGBTQ community center, because there are many. Find the resources that are out there that you can that will make you a better educator, because as an educator myself, like, my main job is to serve my students. Like, I need to make sure that every single one of my students feels included, and not just included, but that they belong there, that this is their place, that they have a voice, and that, they are, a fully realized, important person in the world. And that's every educator's job. And the educators who are not doing that right now are not doing their jobs. And it's also not up to LGBTQ people to educate cis het individuals. So people need to educate themselves. So pick up a book and we'll talk to somebody whose job it is to, reach out to people. Have, talk to your administrators and get individuals and organizations in to perform, trainings, to educate. There are services out there that are designed specifically to help train educators on how to be better people.
I'll say, if you're an educator and you think that you don't have genderqueer or non-cisgender students in your school, it probably just means you're not safe enough to come out to yet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
And within St. Louis, for people who are listening from St. Louis, I'll call out that we have two excellent organizations, Metro Trans Umbrella Group, which deals with all people who are outside of the cisgender part of the spectrum. And we have Growing American Youth, which is for everyone on the LGBTQIA+ spectrum who are 21 and under. So,
also in the back of Can't Take That Away, there's an author note where I just sort of talk about my experiences, and I also have resources, links. Obviously, you can't click on a book, but the links are in there, and phone numbers are in there, and you can Google for support if you are if you're in Westchester, New York, because you're watching me and me for some reason. I volunteer at the Loft. It's an LGBTQ+ community center. I've been volunteering there for 4 years now, and they're a fantastic community center. So honestly, just find wherever you are in the country or world, if you are somewhere that's not in the United States, find your local LGBTQ+ community center.
Okay, so we've gone over. So Shane, come back, Shane.
Hi.
Hey.
I can't believe I've used that line on you before.
What?
I can't believe I've never used the come back, Shane line on you.
I'm actually surprised you haven't either. Suspicious. We have some really great audience questions, some very enthusiastic members watching. I can tell that you have a lot of fans in the audience watching.
All right.
So let's start with a question from Nicholas, or Nicholas, or I want to be fancy with everyone's names tonight. So, Nicholas is asking, what has been your favorite part of the debut publishing process so far?
Honestly, hearing from people who have read the book within the last 9 days since it came out, 8 days, 9 days, 10, I don't know how many days, but however long it's been, hearing from people who just have identified with Carrie, and there have been like 1 or 2 people that have been like, you're my new favorite author, this is my new favorite book, and like that's a whole emotional thing that I really wasn't expecting, but that was really fantastic. And there are a couple people that have been doing a little bit of fan art, so that's cool. That was honestly like a bucket list thing that like I have always wanted, so that's been cool.
That's another big perk of YA. No one does that for like literary fiction. Like no one does that for mysteries. Like fan art, like that's like purely for kids events and authors. Yeah. So that's
fantasy authors get it too.
Wait, what?
Fantasy authors get it too.
Oh,
not all the time they'd like.
Yes, fantasy authors for sure.
Yeah. All right, Michelle has a couple of questions. Michelle says, first off, I think you are a wonderful writer. Will there be a sequel to the book? And then she goes on, or I'll say they go on to say, you are fabulous. Is your agent going to get you on the talk show circuit?
So no sequel. I'll never say never that like I won't write in Carrie's world again. I feel like if I do write in Carrie's world, I would want to write something from like Monroe or Joey's point of view, because they're 2 of my favorite characters and I love them. But no plans for a sequel. As far as the talk show circuit, I don't know. I'm a YA writer. Nobody knows about me. So like, I mean, Ellen, I guess if you're listening, or I don't know. I don't even know who does talk shows anymore, but talk show people, book me if you want. I'm here.
Ellen, you can call me. My number's everywhere. So just call me. I'll get in touch with Stephen.
We love that.
Yeah. Nicholas asking possibly my favorite question from the past year, the most creative question. If Can't Take That Away were a Yankee Candle scent, which would it be and why?
I know exactly who this is. I love you, Nick. These questions are amazing. Yankee Candle. Oh God. Is it bad that I don't use Yankee candles? I'm a big like Bath and Body Works candle person. I love a good like eucalyptus scent. I would say maybe like a good like vanilla. Like it's kind of comforting. Maybe, I don't know, like a lavender vanilla type of a situation. Because I like lavender vanilla, so we're gonna go with that.
Yeah, I don't know any like if Yankee Candle uses like fancy like spring in the forest like for their candle names, I would have no idea. So
I can guarantee that Nick would know, and I'm gonna shout him out because his book comes out from Little Brown in May, and it's called Burn It All Down. So everybody should put that on their TBR list because it is fire, literally fire.
I will find that book on our website and send people to it as you are answering Nick's next question. Love the Mariah Carey song that the title is based on. What other titles, Mariah songs, if any, did you consider before landing on Can't Take That Away?
I did actually, for a brief moment, consider Outside, which is a song from the Butterfly album. And it's a song that is referenced in the book, but I also acknowledge it in my acknowledgments if Mariah Carey ever reads the book, because like she's such a huge inspiration. And that book is that song, I mean, is about her being biracial and sort of feeling caught between two worlds, but she writes it so subtly that it can really be about, like, it could be used for anybody. And so for me as a queer person, like, I always felt caught between two identities, two worlds, even from the time I was really young. So that song always spoke to me. But it was just a very boring title for a book. There was one point when my editor wanted All I Ever Wanted as a title, which is a Mariah song from Music Box, which is such a schmaltzy, like, syrupy, sugary love song that did not fit the tone of Can't Take That Away at all. So she was like really championing that for a little while, and I was like, no, I can't do it. It's too much. It gives me cavities just thinking of that song title. So Can't Take That Away was really my top choice for that.
It's hard to tell with the lag, but a different Michelle is saying, I guess, outside. So I don't know if that's in reference to the last parter.
Or what other songs you considered.
Yeah. But I did put the link for Nick's book in the comments as well, so people can order that along with your book. Yeah.
While we're talking about the title, can I ask about the cover? Because I know authors don't always get to have anything to do with their cover. But this is so Carrie front and center.
I mean, Carrie is, I'm not even, like, if you see this book, like, the cover art is gorgeous, but like, you see this in person and like, I don't know how you like stop yourself from like dying, because it's beautiful. And my editor really wanted to have a non-binary artist do the cover design for it. So that was something that like she was set on, and like, I love her. Like, she's not my editor anymore. She left, but like, we love you, Annette, wherever you are. Hope you're listening. But the cover artist, Hilde at Atlanta, they are based out of Amsterdam, I think. And like, just look up their work. It is like absolutely exquisite and gorgeous. And I was sort of involved from the beginning. I was sent all the sketches, asked for feedback. I asked for, they asked me about coloring options. Like, there was at one point when the background was purple and Carrie's shirt was green. And I was like, absolutely not. It looked horrible. It looked like Mardi Gras. I was like, we're a little heavy-handed with the genderqueer flag here. Like, we don't need that to be like, that we don't need that to take over the actual art of it. And so like, when they came back with this color scheme, I was like, yes, it's Carrie. It's perfect.
Well, we are almost out of time, but Sarah, from the very beginning that you, like, when this whole event conversation was possible, you have been such a fan of this book, and it really shows in the conversation.
I want to thank Phoebe at Bloomsbury, because
love Phoebe.
I've been reading fantasy for her for quite a while, and she sent me an email over a year ago now saying, I have something that's not like what you usually read. It's this story about a genderqueer teen who auditions for their high school musical and gets cast as Elphaba, and there's a huge controversy around it. Is that anything you'd ever want to look at? It's like, Phoebe, little do you know. Fantasy is actually not what I normally read, and you served up a book written for me.
I love it.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Lex. Thank you, Ethan.
Love Phoebe. Love, love, love. And thank you, Sarah. Like, honestly, this is such an amazing conversation. I'm so happy. And thank you for all the love and support.
It's really just, I mean, thank you for writing this book, because it needs a place in the world, and I'm so happy that it is here and is getting to be celebrated by so many people. And I know we're pretty much out of time, but I want to thank the audience for being here. Really, I'm going to share the link again because I know that you might want to, if you have already read it, gift the book to someone else. This is something that needs to be in every single library. It needs to be hopefully on every single bookshelf in the country, in the world.
Yes, whole world. You can't stop at the country. It's got to be the whole world.
Yeah. So this tonight was such a delight. It's really inspiring. I love talking about queer fiction for all ages, and I just so excited for you and for the future of your career.
Thank you so much, Shane. I appreciate that.
All right, audience, we will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a fantastic rest of your evening.
Bye.